Alright, first you want to get started off, you want to have your Raspberry Pi. Mine's got an overclock kit on it, so it looks a little different in a case. Standard setup, composite cable, and your 3.5mm to stereo adapter. An SD card, mine came with mine, this is why it has the Raspberry Pi symbol on it, got mine from Element 14. Super Nintendo USB controller, USB mouse, Ethernet's pretty much a must in this procedure. These two are definitely a must, or HDMI. A keyboard as well. That wireless and the mouse is kind of optional. Alright, so this is a Raspberry Pi. Now, some people hear me talk about it, but haven't seen one close up. It's a $35 computer. It's got an ARM11 single-core processor, overclockable, analog and digital outputs. 2 USB ports here in the Model B along with Ethernet. Model A has 256 megs of RAM. This has 512. I've added 3 aftermarket heat sinks with a cooling fan that's powered off the GPIO. That's the system on a chip with the GPU, CPU, and RAM. 512 megs of RAM. 264 1080p capable GPU and CPU core 700 megahertz to even gigahertz camera, and other expansion ribbons, HDMI, power regulator, heatsink, system on chip heatsink with the fan. Fan's powered 5 volts directly off of the GPIO port. This keeps things really cool. This does. I find that this fan really lets me unleash the power of the Pi, because unless you have actual aggressive cooling, you're going to have problems with overclocking your Pi. So I would recommend you get a fan in all means, and keep this thing clean. This is like the north bridges for all the different input outputs. This is the analog sound and video, composite, and left and right through a headphone jack for, I guess, for size considerations. Of course, this thing is also output, of course, HDMI. That blue one there for 3.5mm. Just get the headphone jack adapter and you'll be fine. HDMI, same thing. I'm using a Dollarama $3 3-foot quick cable, which is quite fine. This is the Ethernet right here. There's the 2 ports as well for the USB. The Ethernet's 10/100. I connected mine directly into my laptop's Ethernet port. Not doing a bridge, but sharing the internet connection, so therefore to be a direct connection I can drag and drop things in and out. A little bit more closer look now at the actual power supply is a USB micro type A. This is power only, this is not data. Do not power this off of your computer. Power this with a 2 amp USB supply. This as well is the hard drive, I guess you could say, the micro SD card that came with it. I use a 32 gig of mine, but there's an 8 gig that came with it in this right now. I got mine from Element 14, so I got the official Raspberry Pi one. This case is like $10, got off eBay. Really easy to put together. You can buy free cases. I like the fact that there's ventilation for the fan, so my fan can keep extra cool no matter my overclock so far. From day one I've had that actually on there when I've been overclocking, just to make sure. I didn't want to have my Pi going and have it get too hot. And plus they came with little thermal adhesive strips, so it all sticks quite fine and the heat transfers off quite well. I had to do a little addition to this case. I had to drill a hole there. Didn't even think to melt the hole later on. That's the GPIO pins there as well that I'm pointing at. You can hook up a lot of different things, cooling and controller ports to it if you wanted to for original Super Nintendo controllers. It's not a very expensive part to get. It's $15, and then you can wire the controller ports directly in. That blemish there, though, I drilled a pilot hole, but I drilled a really small pilot hole, I think was my mistake. Then I went in with a big one, and it gripped in, and it kind of shattered a bit of the plastic. Yeah, I could have melted it again. I still can kind of repair that a bit. It's not really that bad. But the case you should get, even if it's the printed out free one that you can get with a PDF and some cardboard. As I said, a USB hub would be good. The only time I'd recommend one is if you have a powered hub and you're giving power to the Pi separately, either through its own adapter or you've modified your hub to, through parallel, power the Pi as well. I've modified mine so it does do that, but this thing here does not get any less than 2 amps if you can. If you're powering it on its own through its own adapter and you hook it up a hub afterwards, the hub can grab power through the Pi. But yeah, try to get at least 1 or 2 amp power supply for powering this thing, otherwise you're not going to get very far with it. Hanging out the shelf cable will work, of course, as long as you're plugging this thing directly into the wall or, into a powered hub that supports back powering. If you're going to try to plug this thing into a hub to power it, make sure that hub's back powered. what that means is the fact that it won't fluctuate in power. It might give too much or too little if you plug it into a computer and could fry your Pi. This thing can connect to an HDMI television or television with AV. As you can see here, it's got a composite. So you can't do them at the same time, I don't think, but you can actually hook the 3.5mm audio out to do your audio output as opposed to the HDMI. Say if you're hooking into a DVI monitor or something like that doesn't have actual sound output. It's in the software actually, and I'll show you how to do that in a few minutes. As I said, this thing uses all off-the-shelf stuff, USB. Some of it, I guess you could say, is proprietary, but this is a learning computer. You can use it for a lot of different projects. I'm using it right now. I'm going to show you in this video how to make it into a retro gaming setup. I'm going to show you how to even load on a single game. I've shown how to do it before in my other videos, but I'm going to show you how to do this afterwards, after we get through some of the other things such as setup, because the first things you're going to need to do, you're going to need to learn how to get this thing up and running and set up. So we're going to cut to that now. We're going to hook this up and we're going to try this out. So here we go. So I'm capturing through composite, so excuse the slight graininess to this. We're going to boot this Raspberry Pi for the first time. If you're using Windows, just use USB Writer and download your image. I'm going to link to the RetroPie Project's main website, where they host the links for downloading this disk image. This one is a few gigs, so if you've either got a slow connection or you've got a connection where your data is limited until you get charged for it, then I suggest that you either download this at another location or find some other way to download it. I am going to be using this version because this one's the one with the least muss and fuss over it just getting Raspbian. Okay, when you boot in this thing, you have your controller plugged in. This is my Super Nintendo controller. The Super Nintendo controller is only a single player, so I'm just going to do that. And so I'm mapping this right now for the interface, not for the games themselves. This is just actually for emulation station. You're not going to be able to jump in and play games right away. There's a little bit of setup you've got to do, depending upon your hardware you're using and everything like that. And the first thing we got to do is get this thing up and running, because if you're using anything bigger than a 4 gig SD card, you're going to want to do what's called expand the file system. We're going to do that in a second. Right away, it has Cave Story, Doom, Duke Nukem, and a couple of other things here. We're going to exit this actually now in a second. Just thought I'd show you off the main thing. So you're going to go into the terminal. You're going to enter in sudo, which is sudo. That's super user do, it stands for. I'm going to mistype the thing first time. Raspberry config. I forgot that there's a dash. So it's sudo raspi dash. Well, I think, yeah, dash config. Sudo is pretty much the same as admin. Now, first thing we did was resize the partition. Anything over 4 gigs needs to be resized to be larger than an 8 gig card, so we've done that. Now we're going to scroll down here. The Raspberry Pi is a British machine, so it's set predominantly for British settings. And so we're going to go into localization. The first thing we're going to do is change the language settings and the regional settings for number 1. And first thing we're going to do is change the keyboard. So let's scroll down to the EN section. EN's always your default for English. Now it says ENGB, which is Great Britain. First thing we're going to do is we're going to select ENCA UTF, which is pretty much the standard over ISO, and we're going to unselect Great Britain, because otherwise it could put in entry issues into the keyboard, especially if you're using Bash or anything like that. So, and we're just going to go with the Canadian English for the locale setup. So it's going to go through a bunch of stuff here. Don't mind what it says here in the black and white text, unless it says catastrophic errors of any kind. Then you've got a bigger problem than just your installation. You've probably got problems with your actual setup. Now we're going to go in and we're going to change the time zone, because this is probably set for Greenwich Mean Time. I'm in Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada, but I'm on the Newfoundland portion, so we're going to go up to America. Down, I should say. Atlantic Ocean isn't really what you'd want to do. You just go to America, scroll down, and usually they go by the city for the time zone. In my case, you got to scroll down and you got to go to St. John's, because that's the only one for the Newfoundland time zone. NDT is the shorthand for it. So it's going to sync with the internet and everything like that, and it's going to set the time. And now we're going to go change the keyboard layout itself, and the keyboard layout as well as default UK. So it's going to be reset here now as a different keyboard. See, it says generic 105. The SK is what I'm using, actually, the Dell SK, but I'm just going to go with the generic 105 because it's just your regular Windows keyboard with a couple extra keys. So I was just checking the list here to make sure, and so we're going to go to click OK. I'm going to go to Other because, of course, these are all saying UK, and we're not in the UK. We're going to go to English US, and we're going to just scroll straight up to just a regular, plain old English US, because there's the US Dvorak and everything like that. These things you're not going to worry about too much unless you're a power user, so just go along with the preset selections that they give you. And that's all going to set up now. And so, just taking a second now, it's going to set up the key map. And you have to do this as well because you're going to need to go and afterwards, when everything is set up with your controller and your keyboard and everything like this, you have to finalize all your settings. So after we're done this now, we're going to go down to overclock, and this will actually let you pick the speed for your Pi. I pick a beefy 950. I never bother with even 1 gigahertz, but that's definitely what's needed. Now we're going to go to overscan. If you're using a TV that looks like it's boxed everything in, select enable overscan. If your TV looks like the edges and everything are cut off, disable overscan. It's really from TV to TV. So we still got a couple other things to do here now. The advanced options, you want to go down here. You can change your amount of RAM that you've devoted to either thing and go to the memory split. The update tool is what I do recommend you do. Sometimes it won't quite update properly. It's nothing too important here at this point, because more along the lines of if you have the actual script on here updated, it should be updated anyway. But if you're running the latest version of the RetroPie image from the RetroPie Pet Rock blog, then you should be pretty good for that. Now, with that being said, there are other things we have to update in this, and I can't believe this thing is going to be taking so long. So I'm going to pause right there, and we're going to pop back when we get this all. Okay, and there we are. Alright, so now that that's all done, we want to go down to finish, and we do want to reboot right now. This won't be the last reboot either. This is simply just to set up the file system. It's expanded now, so you can load up the card to its maximum. If you don't do this, you'll only use half of the card in the case of the fact that this is an 8 gig card and it's only allowing to do a 4 gig setup. So we're going to let this reboot now. And for posterity's sake, we're going to speed this up a little bit. And we're going to go into the menu and exit it again, hitting that F8, or F4 I believe it was. And now we're going to go CD space capital R retro dash retro capital PIE dash capital S UTUP RetroPie setup. And when we're in there, sudo space period / RetroPie underscore setup .sh, and this is going to launch a script, and what this script does is it allows us to now get into the actual RetroPie settings. Go to number 3 now, the setup, only if you've already run more of the installations above, and they automatically are ran in this version, so you can go to here. Ignore everything now, and you want to scroll down. Oh, there we go. Yeah, you want to update that script first. You can update the script and then exit this and enter it again. And what that'll do is it'll give you some extra support. That's what I mean by having you update, because if you are using an Xbox 360 controller, you're going to want to update that script. For some reason, even though it's the latest version, they don't have the latest script on here. The latest script actually has built-in Xbox 360 driver installation. So just looking through some of these different options, you got a bunch of them here. Steer away from all of these because you've taken care of those in a lot of the different things. But we're going to go back and make sure that this is the 3.5mm sound. You can change all the different RAM frequencies. Don't screw with any of this stuff, really. This is just the up and running right now. We just set up Samba. Now, you're going to need Samba with that Ethernet cord if you're plugging directly into a computer. And the reason why is if you're wanting to do a couple things. One is if you're needing to copy your ROMs from a directory on your computer to your Raspberry Pi, because your Raspberry Pi will show up on your network as a folder. Well, as a computer and as a folder. It's only the ROMs folder that's shared. So, we're going to speed this up a bit because this is actually going to take about 3 to 4 minutes, even on the connection I have. I have fiber optic, but here it is. It's done. And it can be accessed with a guest account. In other words, you can just, as long as you can connect into it on the network, or if both your computers are connected on the one router, I just shared my connection directly to my Windows computer. Now that that's done, we want to check out a couple more things here. So we're going to regenerate the config file. Of course, I always do that just in case. Going to hit cancel. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to re-enter this again. That's you exit and then you re-enter again, simply to make sure. Scroll down. There's a couple other items in here now, and we need to register the controller now. The controller I'm using is the Super Nintendo controller I used in my unboxing. Press all your buttons and everything before you hit enter here. That way your buttons won't be stuck or unzeroed. And so it's going to ask you for your couple of buttons first, and it'll tell you the position generally where it is. It just gives a good idea of the key map then. It uses a raw Linux program driver for this, I think. I forget what it is. Linux raw, actually, I believe it is. Where I'm using a Super Nintendo controller and I don't have L2, R2, and R3 and L3, etc. I actually don't press anything and just let them time out. If you have a 360 controller, then of course, by all means, the L2 and the R2, L3, and R3 would all be inputted. There is no input, however, for the menu button. You can use that input, though, if you're, say, going to use the 360 controller with it and you want something new for your menu in the emulation station front end, the menu, so to speak. Okay, so these are still timing out, and this is the right analog button, R3. So we're... Now, oh yeah, the sticks, actually. You have to input the sticks as well, not just the R3 and L3, but the actual stick positions as well, so it has a... So there's an accurate mapping. So that's all done. You want to make sure you got that done. And then what we're going to do is, after we've registered this controller, you've got to update the input configuration. Not that one, but if you've screwed up your input configuration, you go there. Now you go to the source-based, deselect every item here with the exception of number 12. Configure video rewind and keyboard for RetroArch. This is what's going to make all your settings global now that you've done through the menu and through the controller config. There are 68 items here. Only one has to be selected. So we're going to go through all these, of course, 99 bottles of beer on the wall kind of thing, but you got to double check and make sure nothing else is selected, because it'll make it go for longer and it can screw up the configurations that are already in there, placed by the developers. Now there are you can make note of some of the other emulators that are on there. You can create folders later on in that shared folder that will allow you to have more games. Now we're running this now, and what this is compiling from the source all the configurations, and it's going to sense the configurations that you just did, and it's going to launch this debug log now just for if there were any issues or anything like that, so you can go back and check your errors. But pretty much everything now is applied globally, so we're going to hit OK and exit that. And now we're going to reboot. So let's reboot the... Okay, so now we're going to reboot everything here, and we're going to try everything out. While this is rebooting, and when this is actually into its RetroPie screen, I'm also going to show how you copy games via Samba physically, like if you have your Raspberry Pi set up like my Raspberry Pi, where the Ethernet is plugged directly into your laptop hosting ROM files. You can look up the tutorial on how to do it in Windows 7. All you do is you go into your devices for your internet connectivity, and you share your... in my case, like I have my laptop connects to Wi-Fi, so I actually share the Wi-Fi from the laptop with my Ethernet, not bridging the connection. And I go to the networks folder here and find my Raspberry Pi. And you open this one up. It'll take a second, but all it's going to show is all these ROM folders. Now these are empty except for a couple that they weren't allowed to put on here because they were free quote-unquote software. So I'm going to open up a ROM folder that I have on my computer, and I'm going to hunt through a lot of choices here because I pretty much have the entire North American official and a few unofficial selections here. But I'm going to get, I'm looking for Super Mario All-Stars plus Super Mario World, and we're going to try that one out. So you just take it, drag it from your folder on your computer to the network folder that your Raspberry Pi has. It only takes a second. Now we're going to go back into the RetroPie. It's going to take a second, of course, for it to come up totally in the view. Just got to apply all the settings. If your Raspberry Pi is just left on and it's in its on position, fully booted, you can do this. If you do this and then you copy it over, hit your start button to refresh your Raspberry Pi, so you don't have to restart it, and it'll show the new file listed there. So we're going to show this off here, of course. And, you know, just to prove it to you, besides the fact that, you know, we're showing it here, that you can actually see the interlacing filter that's on here to make an HD TV look like a regular television, although it's kind of lost on this setup here because it's it's being outputted through composite. Picture's not the best quality, but it's pretty good. Just to show you here, of course, the controller does work quite fine. Actually, it works pretty good. I keep forgetting, you know, for this game you actually have to use the start buttons for selecting a lot of things. This is, of course, the audio from the capture we just did. But there's a Raspberry Pi there. It's plugged into the television. I've got a hub plugged into it and everything, and I'm capturing through my computer, of course, but I also have the video split up, so I have a live feed. But, of course, here's Super Mario 3. But, yeah, that's how you get your Raspberry Pi running, and that's how you get everything on the go with it. That's how you get a game going. Next video is going to show you how to use this with the 360 controller. So stay tuned.